When my family forgot my birthday, I booked a luxury vacation that made them beg to join. On my 27th birthday, my family gave my life's work to my brother, and they gave me a gift card. So I did something they never saw coming. I booked a solo vacation so extravagant, it was designed to make them beg to join. Have you ever felt so invisible you had to do something unforgettable? Let me know your story in the comments. My name is Thessaly Garcia, and I invite you to hear my story. The air in the 40th floor conference room of Garcia and Vanguard was so cold it felt brittle, recycled, refrigerated, and utterly soulless, just like the architecture my father had come to champion. I stood alone near the vast floor-to-ceiling window, the skyline of Chicago sprawling below me like a circuit board of cold, indifferent light. In my hands, I clutched a leather-bound proposal, its weight the only thing grounding me. The cover, embossed in simple silver foil, read, "The Willow Creek Community Arts Center." My hands were shaking just slightly. Nerves, I told myself. Excitement. Today was my 27th birthday, and today I was presenting my masterpiece. For 6 months, Willow Creek had been my entire world. I'd spent sleepless nights sketching 3D modeling and sourcing sustainable materials until my vision was perfect. It was a building that breathed. It used reclaimed timber from a defunct local factory, a living green roof to insulate and collect rainwater, and a central atrium designed to capture the morning sun in a way that felt holy. It was everything my grandmother Annalise Garcia had taught me a building should be, a conversation with its community, a shelter for the soul. I had foolishly, naively allowed myself to believe that my family scheduling this presentation on my birthday was their way of finally acknowledging me, a gift. The heavy glass door opened and the board members filed in their dark suits, a flock of crows settling around the monolithic granite table. My father, Caspian Garcia, entered last as always. He was a man carved from ambition, his posture perfect, his gaze sweeping the room with an ownership that left no space for anyone else. He didn't look at me. He never did, not really. My mother, Serafina, glided in behind him, a vision in Chanel, her smile as polished and impenetrable as the table before her. She paused beside me, her perfume a cloud of expensive judgment. "Thessaly, darling," she whispered, her voice a silken razor as she adjusted the lapel of my blazer. "Do try to be concise. The board has a very, very busy morning." She said it with a smile, but her eyes delivered the real message: don't embarrass us, don't be too much. Then came my brother Orion. He swaggered to my father's side, the heir apparent in a suit that was just a little too tight, a smirk plastered on his face. He looked like a cheap copy of my father, all sharp angles and no substance. He caught my eye for a fraction of a second, and in his gaze I saw it all pity, contempt, and a flicker of something that might have been triumph. My stomach tightened. "Good morning," my father announced, his voice booming with an authority that commanded silence. He stood at the head of the table, a modern-day king addressing his court. "Before we get to the smaller agenda items," he waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that I felt like a physical slap. "I have a major announcement." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "As you know," he continued, "we have been in intense negotiations to secure the architectural contract for OmniCorp's new global headquarters." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of the name fill the room. "As of this morning, we have succeeded." A wave of polite, forceful applause rippled through the room. My mother beamed a perfect picture of the proud corporate wife. I held my breath, my proposal feeling heavier in my hands. He would announce OmniCorp, and then he would introduce my project as the firm's new direction. A balance of commerce and art. That was the only thing that made sense. "Orion will be lead architect on the project," my father declared, placing a proprietary hand on my brother's shoulder. Orion puffed up his smirk, widening into a grin. "He has developed a bold, cost-effective, and powerful design that perfectly reflects the OmniCorp brand." An image flashed onto the massive screen behind him, a 3D model of a skyscraper rotating slowly in digital space. My blood turned to ice. It was a tower of black glass and steel, a monolithic tombstone that stabbed at the sky. It was brutal, it was soulless, and it was familiar. It was a design I had sketched 2 years ago, a rough concept for a corporate tower that I had abandoned, disgusted by its lack of humanity. But he'd found it. He'd taken it. And they had stripped it of the few innovative features I'd included, the tiered gardens, the light-refracting fins, and scaled it up to a size that was nothing short of obscene. The board erupted in another round of applause, louder this time. They were clapping for my stolen, gutted work, a design I was ashamed to have even conceived. I stood frozen, a ghost in my own life, watching my brother accept congratulations for my failure. My project, the Willow Creek Community Arts Center, my heart and soul bound in leather, was never mentioned. It didn't exist. I didn't exist. I don't remember leaving the room. The next thing I knew, I was sitting at my stark white desk in the open-plan office space. People moved around me in a blur, their faces averted. No one met my eye. The same colleagues who had praised my sketches for Willow Creek now seemed to find the patterns on the carpet utterly fascinating as they passed. I was a pariah, a failure. On my keyboard sat a single crisp white envelope. My name Thessaly was written on it in my mother's flawless, impersonal cursive. I slid it open with a numb finger. Inside was a generic birthday card, a watercolor painting of a champagne bottle. The message was scrawled in the same perfect script. "Happy birthday, darling. So proud of all your hard work for the family. We're celebrating the Omnicorp win tonight at Gibson's. 8 p.m. Don't be late." Tucked inside was a $500 gift card to Neiman Marcus. I stared at it. A gift card. Not cash, not a check, not a thoughtful gift that showed they knew what I loved, what I dreamed of. A transactional, antiseptic, utterly thoughtless piece of plastic. It was a bonus for a job well done, a pat on the head for the family workhorse. It was the ultimate insult, a message screamed in silent, condescending ink. "We have no idea who you are." Something inside me, a cord that had been stretched taut for a decade, finally snapped. It wasn't a loud, violent break. It was a quiet, deadly parting of fibers. The rage that followed was just as quiet, just as cold. It wasn't the hot, tear-filled anger of a girl. It was the cold, calculating fury of a woman who had finally been pushed past her limit. This wasn't just about a forgotten birthday, or a stolen design, or a condescending gift. It was about the slow, methodical assassination of my spirit. I didn't go to Gibson's that night. I walked out of the gleaming Garcia and Vanguard Tower, leaving my leather-bound soul on the desk, and didn't look back. I went home to my silent apartment and walked to the heavy oak chest at the foot of my bed. I unlocked it, the key turning with a click that echoed in the stillness. Inside, beneath a pile of old sketches, was a small velvet-wrapped box, my grandmother's last gift to me. Inside the box was not jewelry, but a single ornate old-fashioned key and a sealed letter. Her familiar, elegant handwriting, so full of life compared to my mother's, graced the envelope. For my Thessaly, not for when you are in trouble, but for when you are ready to be free. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. The letter told me of a safe deposit box at a downtown bank, and a trust fund she had established for me years ago, a secret she had kept from everyone, especially my father. It was my arsenal, she called it, my escape hatch. An hour later, I was in the cold, quiet vault of the bank, the long metal box open before me. Inside lay the trust documents. I stared at the balance, at the impossible number of zeros, and the cold rage inside me began to burn. It forged itself into a single sharp point. A plan. I wasn't just going to leave. I wasn't just going to disappear. That would be too easy for them. They would mourn for a day, spin a story for their friends, and move on. No, I was going to make them see me. I was going to make them feel the full weight of the person they had so carelessly thrown away. I was going to take everything they valued, prestige, reputation, legacy, and I was going to burn it to the ground, or build something better from its ashes. My vacation was about to begin, and the first stop was revenge. The sterile chill of the bank vault clung to me all the way back to my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow from Chicago's perpetual twilight was enough. I slid the heavy metal safe deposit box onto the center of my hardwood floor and knelt before it like an acolyte at an altar. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid. It was an archive of a life, my grandmother's life. It wasn't money or jewels. It was something infinitely more valuable. It was her soul preserved on paper. Stacks of journals bound in worn leather, tied with faded silk ribbons. Rolled canvases of original blueprints, the graphite lines still sharp and decisive. And on top of it all, a thick typewritten manuscript with a simple title, Symbiotic Architecture, a manifesto. The plan wasn't just about escape anymore, it was about reclamation. My grandmother, Annalise Garcia, was a legend whose name my father had polished for prestige, while simultaneously burying her philosophy. She believed buildings were living things partners with the earth they stood on. My father? He saw them as assets. He built monuments to ego while she had crafted shelters for the human spirit. She had left me more than a trust fund. She'd left me her arsenal. I spent that night surrounded by these beautiful ghosts, the air growing thick with the scent of old paper and memory. I untied the ribbon on a journal from 10 years ago and let it fall open. Her handwriting, a graceful slanted script, filled the page detailing her growing frustration with my father. Caspian sees a spreadsheet where I see a skyline one entry read. He speaks of maximizing square footage, while I speak of maximizing light. He stripped the green wall from the Miller proposal today, said it wasn't cost-effective. He doesn't understand that some things don't have a price tag. You can't put a number on the feeling of tranquility. He is turning my art into a commodity. My fingers traced the words, a familiar ache blooming in my chest. This was the battle I had been fighting my whole life without even knowing it. I felt a sudden desperate need to talk to someone who would understand someone who had also escaped the firm's gilded cage. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only number I could. Maya, I asked, my voice raspy. Tess, what's wrong? You sound weird, she replied instantly. Maya had been a junior architect with me at the firm before she'd quit a year ago, citing a desire to not sell her soul for a corner office. She was now thriving at a small boutique firm in Denver. He did it, Maya. I said the words spilling out. He stole my Willow Creek concept. Gutted it for some tech company. Orion is the lead architect, and for my birthday, I got a Neiman Marcus gift card. There was a beat of silence on the other end, then a low, dark chuckle. Of course he did, she said, her voice devoid of surprise. The boy king gets the castle, and the princess gets a shopping spree. Figures. So, what are you going to do about it, Thessaly? Please tell me you're not just going to take it. I'm doing more than that. I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me as I spoke the words aloud for the first time. I'm cashing out. Grandma left me a significant trust fund. No way, Maya breathed. Annalise, the OG, of course she did. She saw this coming. So what's the plan? Europe, a quiet beach where you can drink margaritas and watch the sunset. Something better, I said, flipping through the journal as we talked. Something more poetic. And that's when I saw it. An entry from the last year of my grandmother's life. Her handwriting was a little shakier, but the words were fierce. A single name was circled twice in red ink. Silas Croft. Wait, I whispered, interrupting myself. I read the passage aloud to Maya. Silas Croft, he understands. He sees the soul, not just the structure. He came to me again today, a private visit. His vision for the desert, it's a symphony. He is the future if only Caspian would listen. But my son only hears the sound of his own ambition. Silas Croft, Maya gasped. Tess, are you kidding me? He's the unicorn of the architectural world. A ghost. My new boss worked for years just to get a proposal on his desk, and it came back unopened. My heart was pounding now, a frantic, hopeful drum against my ribs. Silas Croft, the reclusive ecotech billionaire. My father had been chasing him for years, seeing him as the ultimate prize, the one client who would cement the Garcia and Vanguard name into immortality. He was planning to build an entire sustainable city from scratch in the New Mexico desert, a project that would make the Omnicorp headquarters look like a public restroom. It was the Holy Grail. After I hung up with Maya, I searched through the rest of the box with renewed purpose. Tucked into a hidden pocket in the back cover of that final journal, I found it. A letter. The paper was thick, creamy cardstock. The letterhead a simple, elegant SC embossed in copper. It was from Silas Croft to my grandmother. His words weren't those of a client to a contractor. They were from one visionary to another. He detailed his dream of a city that lived in harmony with the desert, a community powered by the sun and sheltered by the earth. The last line made my breath catch. Annalise, he'd written, this cannot simply be a project. It must be a partnership. I don't need an architect. I need a poet who speaks in stone and light. I need you. I was holding the key to everything. My father thought the way to Silas Croft was through money and power. He was wrong. The way to Silas Croft was through the ghost of a blueprint, through the soul of Annalise Garcia. The rest of the night was a blur of focused, feverish activity. This wouldn't be a simple vacation. It would be an architectural pilgrimage, a journey to the heart of what mattered. I opened my laptop, the glow illuminating my determined face in the dark room. First, a private LLC registered in Delaware Solara Designs, then a new credit card under the company name. I became a ghost. A first-class one-way ticket from O'Hare to Salt Lake City, confirmed. A suite at Amangiri in Utah, a hotel carved from the canyon walls, a masterpiece of symbiotic design, confirmed. A private villa in Sedona, a place of red rock and quiet power, confirmed. And finally a small historic casita for 2 weeks in Santa Fe, walking distance from the address on Silas Croft's letterhead, confirmed. With every click a layer of my old life sloughed away. I wasn't their daughter, their sister, their silent workhorse anymore. I was the founder of Solara Designs. I was the keeper of the legacy. I was a force of nature they hadn't seen coming. My final act before closing the laptop was to draft an email. I typed and deleted, wanting the words to be perfect, perfectly cold, perfectly final. To Caspian Garcia, from Thessaly Garcia. Subject resignation. Caspian. I am resigning from Garcia and Vanguard effective immediately. My work is my own. Thessaly, I stared at the 2 simple sentences. They were a declaration of independence, a war cry. I clicked the schedule send button, timing it for 8:00 a.m. the next morning, the exact moment my flight would be taking off. As I hit the final confirmation, a wave of pure, unadulterated power washed over me. They had made me invisible for years. Now they were going to have to watch me fly. The surreal physics of takeoff pressed me back into the plush leather of the first-class seat. For the first time in my adult life, I was on a plane that wasn't a flying coffin, taking me to a client meeting in some bland corporate city. I wasn't an accessory to my father's ambition. I was just a passenger, anonymous, free. The flight attendant, a kind-faced woman with a warm smile, leaned over. "Champagne before we're fully ascended?" she asked in a conspiratorial whisper. I smiled back, a real smile that reached my eyes. "Absolutely." "Celebrating something special?" she asked, as she filled the flute with bubbling gold. I looked out the window as the gray maze of Chicago shrank below, becoming an abstract pattern. A new beginning, I said more to myself than to her. At exactly 8:00 a.m. Central Time, I raised my glass to the window. "Cheers, Dad." I pictured the email, my 2 cold, simple sentences landing in his inbox. I imagined his face tightening, the disbelief giving way to a volcanic fury. I imagined my mother's panicked call, Orion's confused bluster. I imagined the chaos, and from 30,000 feet, I felt nothing but a profound, glorious, and long overdue sense of peace. I didn't reach for my phone. The point wasn't to witness their immediate reaction. The point was to let them simmer in the one thing they never gave me: silence. After landing in Salt Lake City, I picked up my rental, a sensible, powerful SUV, not the flashy sports cars my father and brother preferred. The drive south was a gradual shedding of skin. the city's sprawl gave way to suburbs, which in turn melted into rolling hills and finally into the raw, majestic emptiness of the high desert. The sky here was different, bigger. It was a canvas of impossible blue, so vast it made the tallest skyscraper in Chicago feel like a child's toy. The landscape was painted in strokes of rust ochre and deep canyon shadow. It was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was: ancient, powerful, and utterly indifferent to the petty dramas of men. It was a master class in my grandmother's philosophy. Amangiri appeared out of nowhere, not an imposition on the landscape, but an extension of it. It was less a hotel and more a secret whispered among the canyons. As I stepped out of the car, a woman with a serene smile and calm, knowing eyes greeted me. "Welcome, Miss Garcia," she said. Her name tag read, "Lena, we've been expecting you." She led me through open-air walkways, the architecture framing the desert like a living work of art. "The desert has a way of showing you what's essential," she remarked quietly as we walked. "It strips everything else away." My suite was a sanctuary, a clean, minimalist space of pale, concrete natural stone and warm wood. An entire wall of glass slid away, opening my room to a private terrace and an infinite view of the ochre-colored mesas. There was no clutter, no gold-plated pretense. It was a space designed for breathing. For the first time in a decade, I felt like I could actually fill my lungs. I spent the next 24 hours in a self-imposed digital detox. It was a sacred vow of silence. I left my phone off, tucked away in my suitcase like a dormant viper. I swam in the main pool, a stunning ribbon of blue that wrapped around a giant escarpment of rock, the cool water a balm on my skin. I took a solitary hike on a marked trail, the only sounds the crunch of my boots on the gravel and the sigh of the wind. I didn't push myself. I just walked. That evening I sat on my private terrace, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, and watched the sun bleed across the sky, painting the canyons in shades of fire and rose. And as the first star pricked the deep velvet of twilight, a single tear traced a path down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release, a quiet baptism in the heart of the desert. On the morning of the second day, I made coffee and sat on the terrace. The air was cool and smelled of sage. I felt centered, calm. It was time. With a steady hand, I retrieved my phone and powered it on. The assault was instantaneous. A cascade of notifications so violent the phone vibrated across the stone table. It was a digital scream. 53 missed calls, 117 text messages. The sender list was a sad, predictable triptych of my life. Father, mother, Orion. I scrolled through the texts, my face impassive. They were like watching a car crash in slow motion. Orion started with confusion, then morphed into panicked rage. What the hell is this? Thessaly, where are you? Dad is losing his mind. You can't just quit. You work for us. The last text sent an hour ago was just call me now. My mother's were a master class in passive-aggressive manipulation. Thessaly, darling, this is not funny. You are embarrassing us. Your father's partners are asking questions. Please call me this instant so we can sort out this little episode. Then later, I am truly worried about you. Are you all right? I hope you are safe. The feigned concern was almost more insulting than the anger. My father had sent only 3, each one a hammer blow. The first, a foolish, childish stunt. Retract your resignation within 24 hours. The second, 12 hours later, your access to all company accounts has been terminated. Do not imagine you can use our resources for this temper tantrum. The third, from just this morning. This is your final warning. You will be written out of this family, and my will permanently. You are no longer a Garcia. The threats were so predictable, so hollow. Written out, I'd been written out since birth. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the ceramic warm in my hands. I ignored the 100+ notifications. I silenced the frantic buzzing. And then I opened Instagram. I didn't post a selfie, smiling with a cocktail like some giddy tourist. I didn't post a picture of my face at all. I carefully composed a single artful shot. It was of the architecture of my suite, the severe, beautiful line where the pale concrete wall met the raw, ancient stone of the canyon. The clean edge of the infinity pool seemed to bleed directly into the vast empty horizon. It was a photo that was quiet, powerful, and full of meaning to anyone who truly understood design. I didn't tag the location. The caption was simple, a quote from my grandmother's manifesto, a secret code between her, me, and the world that had actually appreciated her. A building should not be an interruption of the landscape, but a conversation with it. To my family, it would be meaningless, artsy nonsense, but I knew who might be watching. The editors of design blogs, the architects who had revered my grandmother, maybe, just maybe, someone who worked for Silas Croft. It was the first stone tossed into a very large, very still pond. The ripples were just beginning to spread. I hit post, and then I turned my phone off again, a real, slow, satisfied smile touching my lips for the first time in years. This was better than revenge. This was a renaissance. I let the phone stay off for the rest of the day, soaking in the profound, healing silence of the desert. But that evening, as twilight painted the canyons in strokes of violet and gold, a potent curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see the ripples. I powered on the phone, disabling calls and texts but allowing data. I opened Instagram. The post had exploded. It had been shared by Design Weekly, Modern Arch, and even a few international blogs. The comment section was a high-profile symposium I couldn't have paid for. A Pritzker Prize judge had commented with a single, appreciative word, clarity. A well-known architectural critic from New York wrote, "Is this a new direction for G&V? A welcome return to the poetic principles of its founder." I scrolled through a dizzying mix of validation and adrenaline coursing through me. They saw it. They understood. Then I switched over to my texts. The new barrage was, as I'd suspected, different. The raw bullying anger was gone, replaced by a confused, frantic energy. They had clearly seen the industry buzz, and it didn't compute with their narrative of me having a childish breakdown. Orion's texts were a chaotic stream of consciousness. Where are you? What is this new project? People from Design Weekly are calling The Office. What am I supposed to tell them? My mother's text was a thinly veiled interrogation. Thessaly, if this is some sort of elaborate stunt to get your father's attention, I must say it is in terribly poor taste. The Hendersons saw the post and are now concerned about the firm's stability. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My father's soulless glass box was a sign of strength, but a single photo of a thoughtful, beautiful piece of architecture was a cause for concern. It was time I decided to add a little more pressure. It was time to give them something to be truly concerned about. I went to my luggage where I'd carefully stored my grandmother's work. I unrolled one of the blueprints, its edges brittle with age. The vellum was soft as silk beneath my fingertips. It was a design she'd called Desert Bloom, a concept for a single-family dwelling that unfurled from a central point like a flower, its petals, positioned to catch the changing light throughout the day. It was breathtaking. I carried it out to the stone table on my terrace. The sun was low, casting long shadows. I laid the blueprint down its hand-drawn lines, a testament to a time before everything was rendered by a machine. I positioned my phone, carefully capturing a close-up of the elegant title block. In the background, out of focus, but still unmistakable, was the iconic layered landscape of the grand staircase Escalante. It was a clear, deliberate signal of my location to anyone who truly knew their geography and architecture. For the caption, I chose another line from her manifesto, a direct challenge to my father's obsession with the new. I typed, dusting off some old ideas, "The future is in the past." I posted it. Not even 5 minutes later, my phone rang. The screen glowed with a name I hadn't seen in years, Caspian Garcia. He was calling me directly. I let it ring 3 times, took a slow, deep breath, and slid my finger across the screen. "Hello." I answered, my voice deliberately light, almost cheerful. There was a moment of shocked silence on the other end, and then a low growl, a sound I knew well. It was the sound of a predator whose prey had just done something unexpected. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice strained. "I'm on vacation," I chirped. getting in touch with the family legacy. You should try it sometime. The air out here is wonderful. Those blueprints," he hissed the words tight with fury, "are company property." "Actually," I countered, leaning back in my chair, a newfound sense of calm settling over me, "they're not. According to Grandma's will, her personal effects, including all unpublished works, journals, and personal sketches, belong to me. I have the paperwork, it's all quite clear. You, on the other hand, you have that very lucrative, very boring Omnicorp contract. I'm sure that will keep you busy." Another choked silence. I had never spoken to him like this. My entire life had been a series of careful apologies and deferential nods. He didn't know how to respond to a voice that held no fear of him. "What do you want?" "Thessaly," he finally ground out, reverting to the only language he truly understood, the transaction. He thought I wanted something. Money, a title, a bigger office. And at that I laughed. It wasn't a giggle. It was a real, genuine, full-throated laugh that echoed out into the vast, empty canyon, the sound of a chain breaking. "Want?" I asked, my voice still giddy with the absurdity of it all. "Oh, Dad, it's a little late for that now. Don't you think I just wanted my birthday acknowledged? I wanted credit for my work. All I ever wanted was for you to see me." My voice softened, losing its mocking edge. "But you never did. Don't be childish," he snapped. "I'm not," I said, my voice hardening again, becoming as sharp and clear as the desert air. "I'm being strategic. It's a concept you taught me well." And with a calm, steady hand, I ended the call. I sat there for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs, a strange mixture of terror and triumph washing over me. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. My phone chimed. An email. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another volley in the family war, but the sender wasn't a name I recognized. It was just SC Enterprises. My breath caught. The subject line was a single word: Annalise. My hand trembled as I opened it. The message was brief, formal, and yet it felt like a lightning bolt had just struck the stone table in front of me. "Miss Garcia," it read, "my employer has long been an admirer of your grandmother's work and was intrigued by your recent public posts. He believes, as she did, that the soul of a project lies in its foundation. He has noted your apparent proximity to the region. Should your travels bring you to New Mexico, he would be open to a conversation." It was signed K. Jennings, Executive Assistant to Silas Croft. I read it once, then twice. He had seen the signal. He had heard the whisper in the canyon. This was no longer just a rebellion. The game had just changed entirely. Leaving Amangiri felt like emerging from a chrysalis, vulnerable, but with a new and unfamiliar strength. The drive south out of the stark, silent canyons of Utah and into the vibrant electric landscape of Arizona was a journey into a different state of being. The red rock formations of Sedona rose from the earth around me like ancient slumbering cathedrals. There was an energy here, a palpable hum in the air that was less about quiet contemplation and more about creation. If Amangiri was where I went to heal, Sedona was where I came to build. My next stop was a testament to that creative spirit. I'd rented a private home, an architectural marvel known as the Mesa House, built directly into the side of a crimson cliff. Its most famous feature, and the reason I'd chosen it, was a meditation room made almost entirely of glass, cantilevered over the edge of the mesa, offering an uninterrupted view of the entire valley. It was a space for someone who wasn't afraid to look down. Waiting for me on the polished concrete entryway was a sleek oblong package. It had been overnighted from Santa Fe. I knew instantly who it was from. My cousin Rowan, the only member of my family who had managed to escape the Garcia vortex with his soul intact. He'd walked away from the firm and a guaranteed fortune 10 years ago to open a small, struggling, and now wildly successful contemporary art gallery. He was my silent co-conspirator, my only tether to a sane version of family. I tore it open. Inside was a portfolio handcrafted from rich dark leather, the kind that smells of earth and craftsmanship. Tucked into the front pocket was a note written on his gallery's thick cardstock in his familiar artistic scrawl. For the big meeting it read, "Annalise would be so proud. Fill this with your magic. P.S. The princeling called me yesterday fishing for information about you. He tried to be casual, but he has all the subtlety of a panicked bull. I told him I'd heard you'd joined a rather intense spiritual retreat to find yourself and were completely off the grid. He seemed to actually believe it. They're so predictable. Give 'em hell, Tess. R. A laugh warm and genuine escaped my lips. I hugged the portfolio to my chest. He was my ally. I wasn't entirely alone in this. Buoyed by his support, I spent the rest of the day working with a focus I hadn't felt in years. I spread my grandmother's blueprints across a massive stone table, their ghostly lines a conversation across time. Next to them, I laid out my own designs for the Willow Creek Center. I wasn't just compiling a presentation. I was weaving a story. I sketched, I wrote, I synthesized her timeless philosophy with my modern tech-integrated approach. I was creating a new proposal, a 10-page vision for Silas Croft's Desert City. I called it Project Solera, a city in conversation. It was the best work I had ever done. That evening, as the setting sun ignited the red rocks until they looked like glowing embers, I decided it was time to escalate the psychological warfare. It was time for a performance. I went to the glass meditation room. I placed a simple cushion on the floor. I opened my grandmother's journal to a page filled with her elegant, forceful script. Using my phone's self-timer, I staged the photo. I sat my posture serene, my gaze directed not at the camera, but out at the magnificent fiery vista. I wanted to look like someone who was having a profound spiritual awakening, the exact kind of thing that would make my ruthlessly pragmatic family's skin crawl. The caption was a direct challenge aimed straight at their corporate hearts. I wrote, "Sometimes you have to get quiet to hear the truth. And the truth is, some legacies are worth fighting for." I posted it and waited. The reaction was faster this time, and it was pure panic. My phone rang, and it was my mother. "Thessaly, what is the meaning of this?" she asked, her voice a high, tight wire of barely contained rage. Seraphina's composure was her armor, and it was cracking. A spiritual retreat, posting these cryptic messages, "You are making a mockery of this family." Constance Meyer just called me from the charity board. "People are talking. They're saying you've lost your mind." On the contrary, Mother, I replied, my voice as calm and steady as the sunset I was watching. I infused it with just a hint of airy, new age tranquility I knew she despised. "I think I'm finally finding it. It's truly amazing what you can discover about yourself when you're not being constantly told who you're supposed to be. This is not a joke," she shrieked, her voice losing its polished edge. "Your father is on the verge of losing the Henderson account because of this spectacle. They're looking at your Instagram, and they're concerned about the stability of the firm's leadership." A slow, triumphant smile spread across my face. The Hendersons, one of my father's oldest, most conservative clients. The fact that they were spooked, that my little photo had reached the inner sanctum of their business, was a victory beyond my wildest dreams. My campaign was no longer a personal stunt. It was a legitimate threat to their bottom line. "Oh, I wouldn't worry about the firm, Mother," I said coolly. "You have the Omnicorp deal. Remember, Orion is the lead. Isn't he the future of the company? I'm sure a star architect like him can handle a little client anxiety." I could almost hear her grinding her teeth from 1,000 miles away. "I have to go now." I continued, my voice dropping into a gentle meditative whisper. "My evening session is about to begin. It's all about letting go of toxic energy. You should try it sometime." I hung up before the explosion could erupt through the phone. I sat there in the glass box suspended over the darkening valley and felt the power dynamic of my entire life shift on its axis. The feeling was absolutely terrifyingly intoxicating. The morning after my mother's frantic phone call, I felt a fragile sense of peace settle over me. I was on the terrace of the Mesa house, a cup of strong black coffee, warming my hands, watching a pair of hummingbirds, tiny iridescent jewels of kinetic energy, dart between the brilliant desert flowers. The air was cool and clean. For the first time, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life was gone. I was winning. I was in control. And then my phone rang. The number was unknown, but the area code was 505. Santa Fe. My heart gave a violent lurch. Silas Croft. Had he gotten my unspoken message? Was he calling me directly? I took a steadying breath and answered, my voice cooler than I felt. "This is Thessaly." "Okay, you are not going to believe this," a familiar, amused voice said, and my shoulders sagged with a mix of relief and disappointment. It was my cousin Rowan. "Your dear brother Orion the Great is currently standing in my art gallery." I nearly dropped my phone. The fragile piece of the morning shattered into a million pieces. What I breathed, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the stone floor. Why, how he flew in last night on the red-eye. Rowan said, his voice a dry, running commentary. "Showed up here about an hour ago, trying to act all casual. Just in town on business, thought I'd see how my favorite cousin is doing. He's a terrible liar, Thessaly. He looks like a Ken doll that's been left in a hot car. He's sweating right through his $1,000 silk shirt." My mind was racing, the calm of the desert replaced by the cold, frantic calculus of a chess match. They knew, or they suspected. The Henderson account scare must have sent my father into a tailspin. This wasn't a random visit. This was a mission. "He's fishing, isn't he?" I asked, pacing the length of the terrace. "About me. About Croft," Bingo Rowan confirmed. "He's currently pretending to be fascinated by a very expensive, very abstract sculpture that I know for a fact he thinks is garbage, all while trying to scan the room for, I don't know, clues. He keeps asking about the local architecture scene, trying to sound sophisticated. He just dropped Silas Croft's name so heavily, I think he chipped the floor tile." This was a complication I hadn't anticipated. Orion was arrogant a fool in many ways, but he wasn't entirely stupid. He was my father's bulldog. If he was in Santa Fe, it was to do one of two things: get to Silas Croft first, or find me and neutralize me before I could. They were trying to frame me as the unstable rogue element, the emotional daughter having a breakdown, while Orion, the steady son, represented the family's stable future. The fear that pricked me was sharp, but the anger that followed was sharper still. My father's moves were so predictable, so clumsy. A new resolve, hard as steel, settled in my gut. "I need a favor, Rowan," I said, my voice low and urgent. "A big one." "Anything for the rebellion?" he replied instantly, his tone shifting from amused to serious. "You're his only family contact there. He trusts you, or at least he thinks he can manipulate you." I said, my mind working quickly. "I need you to be a distraction, a complete and total dead end. Take him to the longest, most boring lunch of his life. Show him historic mud churches. Tell him about pottery. I need you to drain his will to live." Rowan chuckled. "A mission I will accept with great pleasure." But more importantly, I continued, stopping at the edge of the terrace and staring out at the vast landscape. "I need you to plant some misinformation, casually. Tell him you heard a rumor from one of your art world connections that Silas Croft is exclusively meeting with a handful of avant-garde firms from Europe for the Desert City project. Tell him Americans aren't even in the running. Make it sound credible, like insider gossip." There was a pause, and I could practically hear the mischievous grin spreading across Rowan's face. "Oh, that is diabolical. I love it," he said. "Consider it done. By the end of the day, Orion will be convinced he's on a wild goose chase. I'll be the best damn tour guide he's ever had. I will bore him into submission." After we hung up, I stood motionless, my hand clutching the phone. The game had changed. This was no longer a long-distance war of whispers and photographs. My family was on the board now, moving their pieces, and they were closing in. Orion's presence here in the Southwest confirmed how deeply I had rattled them. They were no longer just angry. They were scared. Scared that I had something they wanted, something they couldn't get without me. And they were right. There was no more time for quiet reflection, no more waiting. It was time to make my move. I strode back inside my mind, clear and sharp. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I pulled up the email from Silas Croft's assistant, my heart pounding a steady, powerful rhythm. To K. Jennings from Thessaly Garcia, subject, Re Annalise. Dear Miss Jennings, thank you for your message. The admiration was mutual. My grandmother spoke of Mr. Croft's vision often. My travel plans have accelerated slightly. I will be in Santa Fe tomorrow and would be honored to have the conversation Mr. Croft suggested. I have something of my grandmother's I believe he needs to see. Sincerely, Thessaly Garcia. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came back in under an hour, a testament to an efficiency that stunned me. It was breathtakingly brief. Miss Garcia, it read, Mr. Croft has cleared his schedule. He will see you at his estate tomorrow at 2 p.m. Directions will follow in a separate encrypted message. I closed the laptop. It was time. Time to move past the whispers, the mind games, and the photographs. Time to present the ghost of a blueprint and see if I could turn it into a living, breathing future. My brother could stumble around Santa Fe on his fool's errand, all he wanted. I was about to walk through the front door. The encrypted directions led me away from the familiar roads of Santa Fe up a winding private drive that seemed to ascend directly into the vast blue sky. There were no gates, no security cameras, no ostentatious signs of wealth, just the quiet crunch of my tires on the gravel. And then I saw it. Silas Croft's estate wasn't an estate. It was a testament. Sprawling low against the rolling hills, it was a compound of sun-baked adobe vast sheets of glass and shimmering solar arrays that seemed to grow organically from the earth itself. It was a living, breathing example of my grandmother's manifesto. I felt her spirit here in the way the buildings were sited to capture the afternoon light, in the use of reclaimed timber that silvered in the sun, in the quiet, absolute confidence of the design. My nerves, which had been a frantic drumbeat all morning, settled into a low, steady hum of purpose. I was in the right place. I parked the SUV and walked to what looked like the main entrance, a massive weathered wooden door. Before my knuckles could even touch the surface, it swung inward. And standing there was not a butler in a starched uniform, but Silas Croft himself. He was older than I'd expected, maybe in his late 70s, with a lean, wiry frame and a face so deeply tanned and lined by the desert sun that it looked like a beautiful old map. He was dressed in simple, worn blue jeans and a faded chambray shirt, his silver hair pulled back in a short, neat ponytail. He looked more like a reclusive artist than a billionaire philanthropist, but his eyes were sharp and startlingly blue, and they missed nothing. Thessaly Garcia, he said, his voice warm and resonant. He didn't offer to shake my hand, but instead gave a slight respectful bow of his head. Your grandmother had your eyes, full of fire and ideas. Please, he said with a genuine smile, come in. He led me into his home, and I quickly realized it was also his gallery, his library, and his laboratory. The walls were not white and sterile, but a warm hand-plastered adobe lined with towering shelves of books, intricate architectural models, and a stunning collection of Native American art and pottery. There was a sense of profound peace of a life lived with intention. We didn't talk about business. As he gave me a tour, he would pause and ask me questions, but they were never the ones I expected. He gestured to a wall of glass that perfectly framed a distant mountain peak. The light in Utah at Amangiri, he said thoughtfully. Did you find it to be a harsh light or a clarifying one? Clarifying, I answered without hesitation. It strips away the non-essential. He nodded, a flicker of approval in his eyes. He pointed to a complex, beautiful Navajo rug on the wall. Your mother's taste runs more towards Italian marble, I believe. It was a test. They were all tests. He was trying to see if I had her gift, the ability to see beyond the surface, beyond the price tag. He was trying to see if I had her soul. Finally, he led me to his study. It was a breathtaking circular room at the heart of the home with a panoramic 360-degree view of the Jemez Mountains. We settled into 2 simple, comfortable leather armchairs. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was expectant. This was my moment. I didn't launch into a sales pitch. I didn't boot up a PowerPoint presentation. I simply opened the beautiful leather portfolio Rowan had sent me, took out the single decades-old letter from my grandmother's journal, and laid it gently on the low table between us. Silas Croft picked it up as if it were a fragile artifact. His calloused fingers, the hands of a man who worked, traced her elegant signature. He read it slowly, a sad, knowing smile playing on his lips. He looked up at me, his blue eyes holding a deep and ancient respect. "Annalise," he said, his voice soft with memory. "She believed we could build a better world, not just a richer one. Her son," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "does not share her vision." "No," I agreed, my voice quiet but firm. "He doesn't." That was my opening. I didn't speak of my own betrayal of the stolen designs or my forgotten birthday. To do so would be to make this about me, and it wasn't. It was about her. I talked about her manifesto, about her belief in symbiotic architecture. Then I laid out my designs for the Willow Creek Community Center, explaining how I had tried and failed to implement her principles within my father's firm. Finally, with my heart pounding, I presented my new 10-page proposal for his Desert City Project Solara. I spoke for nearly an hour, my voice gaining strength with every word, the passion I had suppressed for a decade finally unleashed. I was no longer the forgotten daughter, the family workhorse. I was the keeper of the flame. When I was finished, an intense silence filled the room. Silas stared out at the distant mountains, his expression unreadable. For a long, terrifying moment, I thought I had failed. "Your father and your brother have been trying to meet with me for 5 years, he said finally, his gaze turning back to me sharp and penetrating. "Your brother Orion is in town right now. He called my office this morning, claiming to have a revolutionary new vision for my project." My blood ran cold. Rowan was right. I told him I was not available. Silas said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "He lacks his grandmother's grace, and her talent." He gently tapped my Solara proposal with his finger. "You, on the other hand, you have both. This is a beginning, Thessaly, a very, very promising beginning." Relief washed over me so powerfully, I felt lightheaded, but he wasn't finished. "But I need to know you can handle the storm that is coming for you," he said, his voice now low and serious. "Your father is a formidable businessman. He will not take this lightly. This project, it requires not just a visionary, it requires a warrior." He leaned forward, his blue eyes locking onto mine, searching for any sign of weakness, of doubt. He was offering me the world, but he was also asking me if I was prepared for the war that came with it. I met his gaze, and all the fear, all the hurt, all the years of silent rage inside me crystallized into a single point of unshakable diamond-hard resolve. "I've been weathering their storm my whole life," I said, my voice quiet, but ringing with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "The difference is, now I'm the one holding the lightning." I drove away from Silas Croft's estate with a signed non-disclosure agreement on the passenger seat and a terrifying new sense of purpose thrumming in my veins. He hadn't given me a contract. Not yet. He had given me a challenge, a test. This project requires not just a visionary, but a warrior. He needed to know that I wouldn't crumble at the first sign of assault from my family. It was time to show him my opening salvo. I pulled the car over onto the dusty shoulder of the road, the mountains a silent council around me. I dialed Rowan. He answered on the first ring. "So?" he said, his voice laced with anticipation. "Do we have a unicorn? We have the promise of a unicorn?" I corrected a grim smile on my face. "But first, I have to go to war. He needs to know I can handle them." "So what's the first move?" General Garcia Rowan asked, his tone shifting from playful to focused. "Phase 2, I said, my voice cold and clear. "Tonight, your gallery. Orion needs to know that I'm here. And more than that, he needs to know in front of everyone that he's been played." A low whistle came down the line. "Oh, I like it," Rowan said, the relish in his voice palpable. "I have an opening tonight for that new sculptor from Taos. It's a small exclusive list, the kind of event Orion would kill to be at. Full of local money, a few politicians, a perfect stage. Invite him," I said. "Tell him it's a last-minute thing, a chance for him to network. He won't be able to resist. And Rowan, make sure a few of your press contacts are there. The ones who write for the big design blogs. Consider it done, he said, the master of dramatic arts already setting his scene. The lamb is being led to his public shearing. That evening I walked into Rowan's gallery on Canyon Road. The space was beautiful, all clean white walls and high ceilings with traditional wooden vigas, a perfect canvas for the vibrant, challenging contemporary art he championed. The air hummed with the low buzz of conversation and the clinking of glasses. It was a room full of Santa Fe's quiet power brokers. And across that room, holding a glass of champagne like a prop he didn't know how to use, was my brother. He was talking to a city councilwoman, a self-satisfied, pompous look on his face. He looked deeply, profoundly uncomfortable, a man in a borrowed suit playing a role he hadn't rehearsed. He hadn't seen me. I slipped into a corner half hidden by a large brutalist metal sculpture and watched. I saw Rowan near the bar looking elegant and completely at ease. He caught my eye over the rim of his glass and gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. The trap is set. A few minutes later, Rowan moved to the center of the room and gently tapped a wine glass with a spoon. A polite hush fell over the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice warm and welcoming. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the incredible work of Eva Rostova." He spoke for a few minutes about the art charming the audience with his wit and passion, and then he paused. And tonight is special for another reason, he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing directly on me. "We have another brilliant artist in our midst. I'd like to offer a special welcome to a truly gifted architect who is gracing our city with her presence, someone who carries the blazing torch of her legendary grandmother Annalise Garcia, my cousin Thessaly Garcia." Every head in the room turned. The movement was a slow collective wave, and in the center of that wave my brother stood frozen. The champagne glass was stalled halfway to his lips. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale white, only to be replaced by a furious blotchy crimson that crawled up his neck. The arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. And I saw it clear as day, the dawning, horrifying realization in his eyes that he had been utterly, completely, and publicly made a fool. I simply smiled a small, polite smile and gave a little wave to the room as if this were the most natural thing in the world. Then I turned my back on my brother's implosion and began a conversation with a woman Rowan had strategically placed next to me. I knew her byline instantly. She was the senior West Coast critic for Architectural Digest. "Annalise Garcia was a hero of mine," she said to me, her eyes bright with intelligence. "It's wonderful to see her legacy being honored." "I'm doing my best to live up to it," I replied calmly. I could feel Orion's eyes burning into my back. The journalists, smelling blood in the water, were starting to circle. He cornered me about 20 minutes later, trapping me between the cold, unyielding metal of the sculpture and his own trembling fury. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice a low, shaking whisper. He was close enough that I could smell the champagne on his breath. The no-contact spiritual retreat. "You're meeting with people behind our backs lying to us." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my mineral water, meeting his gaze over the rim of the glass. "I'm not behind anyone's back, Orion," I said, my voice infuriatingly calm. "I'm right here, in the open. You're the one who came skulking into town, lying about your reasons, trying to steal a meeting you haven't earned. The family," he started, his voice cracking with indignation. "The family," I cut him off, my voice dropping to a steely whisper that was for his ears only, "is an entity that has taken my work, suppressed my talent, and forgotten my very existence. The family has no more claim on me." I leaned in a little closer. "So you can go back to Chicago. You can call Dad. And you can tell him that the game has changed. I am not the family's errand girl anymore." I let a beat of silence hang in the air before delivering the final blow. "I'm its competition." His face crumpled. The arrogant facade, the cheap imitation of our father's power dissolved completely, revealing the raw, terrified insecurity of a little boy who was in far over his head. He knew he had failed. He knew he had been outmaneuvered. Without another word, he turned and practically fled the gallery, pushing his way through the crowd like a drowning man. I stood there for a moment, the cool metal of the sculpture at my back, and took a deep breath. I had won the first skirmish. Not with a shout but with a public declaration of my own worth. But as I watched my brother disappear into the Santa Fe night, I knew this was just the beginning. The call from my father would be coming, and it wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be a declaration of total war. I was back in the quiet adobe casita, the scent of piñon smoke from a neighbor's chimney drifting through the open window. The adrenaline from the gallery confrontation had faded, leaving a strange hollow echo in its place. The victory over Orion felt temporary, a skirmish. I knew with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut that I had just kicked the hornet's nest, and the king of the hornets was about to respond. My phone sitting on the rustic wooden table seemed to hum with a malevolent energy. I was just pouring myself a glass of water when it finally rang. The screen glowed with 2 words that made my blood run cold: Caspian Garcia. I let it ring 3 times, a small deliberate act of defiance. I took a sip of water, my hand surprisingly steady. Then I answered. "You will be on the first flight back to Chicago tomorrow morning," he said. There was no greeting, no preamble. His voice was flat, devoid of the hot, sputtering anger from our last call. This was infinitely more dangerous. This was the voice he used when he was about to gut a competitor, a voice stripped of all emotion, leaving only the cold, hard steel of his will. I leaned against the cool adobe wall. "I don't think so," I replied, matching my tone to his, letting a beat of silence hang between us. "I'm rather enjoying the weather here." "This is not a request, Thessaly," he stated, as if speaking to a subordinate. "It is a summons. There is an emergency board meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. the day after tomorrow. You will be there. We are going to have a thorough discussion regarding the unauthorized use of company assets and your flagrant breach of familial duty." The hypocrisy was so breathtaking it was almost comical. "Let me be clear. Father," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "the only assets I am using are my own bequeathed to me by the woman whose vision you've been profiting from for 30 years. And familial duty. Tell me, was it my duty to have my work stolen and handed to my brother? Was it my duty to be ignored, erased, and undervalued for my entire adult life? My duties to this family are concluded." A long, heavy silence stretched down the line. Then his voice dropped even lower, becoming a venomous whisper. "If you are not at that meeting, Thessaly, here is what will happen. First, I will file an emergency injunction to freeze your grandmother's trust. I will tie it up in litigation for so long you won't see a dime until you are an old woman. Second, I will sue you personally for intellectual property theft, claiming you stole company concepts for your own gain. And third," he paused, letting the final threat land with maximum force, "I will instruct my PR team to drag your name through the mud so thoroughly. I will paint you as an unstable, ungrateful, and incompetent child. No one, not even a reclusive hermit like Silas Croft, will ever trust you with a single dollar or a single blueprint again. I will burn your reputation to the ground." The threats hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He meant every word. I had no doubt. He would scorch the earth just to prove he was still in control. This was it. This was the storm Silas had warned me about. This project requires a warrior. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. For a second, a cold wave of fear washed over me. He could do it. He really could. Then I thought of my grandmother's face, of Silas Croft's steady gaze. The fear didn't vanish, but something else rose to meet it, a cold, hard resolve. "All right," I said into the silence. I could almost hear his surprise, his confusion at my sudden capitulation. He had expected me to fight, to argue, to break. "I'll be there," I continued, my voice steady. "But not because you summoned me. I'm coming to give my own presentation to the board. I'm formally requesting time on the agenda to propose a new, more profitable direction for the firm." He scoffed at the sound, a crackle of static. "You have nothing to propose." "Oh, I think I do." I said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face even though he couldn't see it. "I'm proposing we go after the Solara project. I'm proposing we return to the principles of integrity and vision that made this firm great in the first place. I'm coming to save you from yourselves." I hung up my hand, trembling slightly as I set the phone down. It was a bluff, a massive, audacious bluff. I had no intention of saving them, but he had just given me the one thing I needed, a reason to be in that room. I had to face them on their home turf. because I needed to get my hands on the firm's original partnership documents, the ones detailing my grandmother's founding stake and, most importantly, her intellectual property contributions. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense corporate fighter named Miss Albright, whom I'd hired with my trust money, had been clear. Those documents were the key. They were the shield and the sword that could legally separate Annalise Garcia's legacy from the corporate entity my father had twisted it into. I immediately dialed Rowan. He answered in a worried rush. "Tess, what happened? Orion just called me screaming something about you being a snake. What did you do?" "I'm coming back, Rowan," I said, cutting him off. "Back to Chicago, into the lion's den. Are you crazy?" He breathed, his voice a mix of shock and horror. "They'll tear you apart." "Probably," I admitted, a grim smile touching my lips. "But I need something from the office, something I can't get from here, something only you can get for me while they're all distracted with my public execution." I took a deep breath. "I need you to fly to Chicago, Rowan. I need you to be my Trojan horse." The plan taking shape in my mind was audacious, dangerous, and probably insane. But my father had made a critical, arrogant error. He thought he was summoning his forgotten daughter home to be sacrificed. He had no idea he was actually inviting a warrior armed and ready right through his own front gates. The entire audacious, insane plan relied on one simple, immutable fact: my family's boundless arrogance. They would be so completely focused on my arrival, so busy sharpening their legal knives and preparing the stage for my public shaming, that they wouldn't see the real threat coming. They wouldn't notice the quiet, unassuming artist cousin slipping through their defenses. Rowan was my Trojan horse. He flew into Chicago the day before the board meeting, a day I spent on my own flight back from Albuquerque, a flight that felt like a journey into the heart of a storm. This time I wasn't the liberated vacationer. I was a general returning to the front lines. I didn't look out the window. I spent the hours on a secure messaging app with my lawyer, Miss Albright, a woman with a mind like a steel trap. We reviewed strategy contingencies and the precise legal weight of the words we hoped Rowan would find. "Remember Miss Garcia, Miss..." Albright wrote her words, appearing in crisp blue bubbles on my screen. "Let Caspian make his threats. Let him think he has you cornered. That founding charter is your checkmate. Don't play it until the king is in the open." Meanwhile, Rowan was beginning his Oscar-worthy performance. As planned, my mother Serafina insisted on picking him up from O'Hare herself. She adored Rowan, seeing him as the family's charming, harmless eccentric, a welcome distraction. He was immediately enveloped into the fold as a perceived ally. From the back of my mother's chauffeured Mercedes, he made the call. He put me on speaker. "Thessaly? Oh, thank God I caught you." He began, his voice dripping with a carefully crafted, anxious concern. "I just landed. Your mother and I are... well, we're just so worried about you. We think this has all been a terrible misunderstanding." I could hear my mother's sigh in the background. "We just want you to come home, darling," she chimed in, her voice a practiced melody of maternal care. "We can fix this. The whole family together." It was nauseating. It was brilliant. It was working. They saw him as their pawn, a gentle voice of reason they could use to appeal to my better nature. They had no idea he was my dagger. That evening, the final act of the setup began. They held a family dinner at my parents' sprawling Lincoln Park mansion. It was a transparent ambush, a pre-trial hearing where they could consolidate their power and rehearse their attacks. I received the summons via text from my mother. "Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. It's important we present a united front before the board. Rowan is here." They expected me to walk into that ambush, to be intimidated, to be broken down before the main event. I stayed in my anonymous hotel room overlooking the river. At 6:45 p.m., I sent a single simple text back to her. It read, "Saving my energy for the board meeting, I suggest you do the same. My absence, I knew, would leave a vacuum. It would make me the sole topic of conversation, and it would leave Rowan alone with them, a silent observer in the lion's den." As he recounted to me later, in a hushed, rapid-fire phone call, the atmosphere at dinner was glacial. My father Caspian sat at the head of the table holding court. He didn't eat. He pontificated, outlining for Rowan, and for the benefit of Orion and Seraphina, all the legal and financial ways he was going to systematically dismantle my life. My mother issued martyred sighs, lamenting my shocking betrayal to her poor sweet cousin. Orion just sulked, pushing a piece of sea bass around his plate, a thundercloud of resentment hanging over him. It was the perfect cover. Halfway through my father's chilling monologue on corporate litigation, Rowan made his move. He pressed his fingers to his temple. "Aunt Seraphina," he murmured, his voice faint. "I am so sorry. I think it's the flight. I have a terrible migraine coming on. Would you mind if I just excused myself for a few minutes? Perhaps find a quiet room to sit in?" "Of course, dear boy. Of course," my mother fretted, her attention immediately diverted. "Use your uncle's study. It's the quietest room in the house. Down the hall to the left." Rowan walked down the silent carpeted hallway, his heart pounding. He slipped into the study, a room I knew well, a mahogany and leather shrine to my father's ego. His eyes scanned the room and found the target a large framed photograph of his own father, my grandfather, a stern-faced patriarch in black and white. Rowan lifted it from the wall. Behind it, just as I'd told him, was the dull gray metal of a wall safe. His fingers, usually so steady with a paintbrush, trembled as he spun the dial. My grandmother's birthday, a date my father probably hadn't thought of in 30 years. Click, click, click. The heavy tumblers fell into place. He pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside were folders, deeds, stock certificates. He found the one he was looking for, a thick leather-bound folder with faded gold lettering, G&V Founding Docs, 1975. He laid the pages on my father's massive desk. The phone's camera flash was a series of silent lightning strikes in the dark, sacred room. He photographed the signature page. He photographed the ownership schedule. And then he photographed the Holy Grail, Clause 4B. He put everything back exactly as he had found it, closed the heavy door, replaced the portrait, and slipped out of the room, his heart racing. I was pacing my hotel room like a caged animal when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Rowan. No words, just a single, crystal-clear image of a faded typewritten page. I zoomed in, my breath catching in my throat. There it was. Clause 4B, all original designs, concepts, and artistic renderings created by Annalise Garcia shall remain her sole intellectual property, provided to the partnership on an exclusive royalty-free license for the duration of her involvement. A slow, cold, triumphant smile spread across my face. He had done it. He had secured the weapon. All I had to do now was walk into the boardroom and detonate it. I walked into the Garcia and Vanguard boardroom at precisely 8:59 a.m. The silence that fell was so thick and heavy it felt like a physical weight. The long, polished granite table reflected the grim faces of the board members like a dark, still lake. They were all there, a jury of my father's loyalists, flanked by the firm's top lawyers whose faces were set in masks of bored lethality. At the head of the table, a grim monarch on his throne, sat my father. My mother was seated to his right, a portrait of wounded, elegant grace. To his left was Orion, his face a thundercloud of resentment. They had staged the room for my execution, leaving a single solitary chair at the far end of the table, casting me as the lonely defendant. But I did not look like the victim they had been expecting. I wore a sharply tailored suit of charcoal gray, my hair pulled back in a severe professional knot. In my right hand, I carried the tooled leather portfolio from Rowan. My steps were silent and measured on the plush carpeting. I did not hurry, I did not falter. I took the single empty seat, placing the portfolio on the table before me, and met my father's gaze from across the vast expanse of polished stone. "Thank you for joining us, Thessaly," he began, his voice dripping with a false, paternal condescension that set my teeth on edge. "We are here today to discuss your recent erratic behavior and the significant damage it has caused this firm and this family." He launched into a prepared 15-minute monologue. It was a masterclass in corporate gaslighting. He detailed my unprofessional resignation, my slanderous and juvenile social media campaign, and my delusional attempts to interfere with the firm's business. He painted me as an unstable emotional child throwing a temper tantrum. Then he nodded to his chief counsel, a shark named Mr. Davies. To be clear, Miss Garcia, Mr. Davies chimed in, his voice smooth as oil. Your actions have exposed you to significant legal liability. We are prepared to file for damages related to breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and corporate defamation. I let them talk. I sat in perfect unnerving stillness, my hands resting calmly on my portfolio. I did not fidget. I did not argue. I let them exhaust every last drop of their ammunition, lay every one of their cards on the table. When they were finally done, a smug, self-satisfied silence settled over the room. They looked at me, expecting tears or excuses or a desperate plea for forgiveness. They thought they had won. I let the silence stretch for a full 10 seconds. Then I asked quietly, my voice cutting through the thick tension, "Are you finished?" My father, a triumphant gleam in his eye, gave a curt nod. "Good," I said, and a slow smile touched my lips. I stood up, my movements fluid and confident, because now it's my turn. I didn't address a single one of their accusations. To do so would be to validate them. Instead, I walked to the head of the room, my heels clicking with sharp authority on the marble floor. I plugged my laptop into the presentation screen. For the last decade, I began my voice clear and strong, resonating with a power no one in that room had ever heard from me. This firm has been driving in the wrong direction. It has chased profit, and it has abandoned principle. It has traded its soul for scale. But there is an opportunity to correct that course, a rare opportunity to reclaim our legacy and secure our future. An opportunity. I paused, clicking the first slide into view, called Solera. I laid out the vision for Silas Croft's desert city. I didn't speak with emotion. I spoke with data, with architectural authority, with a deep understanding of the market. I showed them renderings, sustainability reports, and a projected budget that made their Omnicorp deal look like a rounding error. I could see their faces change. The stern masks of judgment began to crack, replaced by the unmistakable glint of greed. This was a language they understood. This project, I continued, my voice steady, the single greatest architectural prize of our generation, is only available to a firm that embodies the principles of its founder, Annalise Garcia. "And what makes you think you can bring this to us?" my father finally exploded, slamming his hand on the table. "Croft won't even take my calls. He won't." I agreed, calmly turning to face him directly for the first time. The entire room held its breath. "Because you have nothing to offer him that he values, but I do." I clicked to the next slide and projected onto the massive screen behind me for the entire board to see was the crystal clear image Rowan had sent me, the faded typewritten page of the Garcia and Vanguard founding charter. I used the remote to zoom in on a single highlighted clause. According to Clause 4B of the firm's own founding documents, I announced, my voice ringing with triumph, all of Annalise Garcia's original work, her designs, her journals, her philosophy, is her exclusive intellectual property, not the firm's. As her sole heir, it is now mine. The room erupted. Mr. Davies and his legal team began shuffling papers, whispering furiously to one another. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. Orion just stared, his face slack with disbelief. And my father? The color drained from his face. He looked at the screen, then at me, his eyes wide with the stunning, horrifying realization that he had been checkmated by a ghost. He had forgotten, or perhaps he had never even bothered to know. Silas Croft isn't interested in Garcia and Vanguard as it exists today, I declared to the stunned room. He is interested in the legacy of Annalise Garcia, a legacy which I now control. So, here is my proposal. I turned my back on my family and addressed the board directly as a CEO, not a daughter. I am forming a new subsidiary firm under the Garcia and Vanguard umbrella. It will be called Garcia Legacy. I will be its president. It will hold the exclusive legal license to my grandmother's work and will be the sole entity to pursue the Solara project. You will provide its seed funding, and in return, you will get a significant share of the most prestigious and profitable project of the century. I let that sink in. If you refuse, I said, my voice dropping to a cool, quiet whisper, I will walk out that door. I will take my intellectual property with me, and I will form a partnership with one of your competitors by the end of the day. The choice is yours. It was checkmate. The room was silent, the only sound the frantic rustling of the lawyer's papers. I had them trapped between their greed and their pride, between their loyalty to my father and their desire for the future I was offering. I looked at my father. He sat frozen speechless, his face a canvas of pure, impotent rage. He had been outmaneuvered, he had been defeated, and it had happened in his own throne room. The aftermath of my ultimatum was not a fiery explosion, but a quiet, cellular collapse of the old order. The boardroom was utterly silent for a moment, the weight of my proposal hanging in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. The board members didn't look at my father anymore. They looked at each other, they looked at their spreadsheets, and they looked at me. George Bellwether, the pragmatic silver-haired chairman of the board, cleared his throat. Well, he said, his eyes flicking from me to my father's thunderous face. He saw a choice the angry, wounded past, or the incredibly lucrative future. It wasn't really a choice at all. A motion is on the table to explore the formation of a subsidiary entity as proposed by Miss Garcia for the express purpose of pursuing the Solara project. All in favor, one by one the hands went up. I said one, I said another. The word echoed around the table, each one a nail in the coffin of my father's absolute reign. When it was his turn, Caspian just stared at me, his face a mask of stone. George didn't wait for him. Motion carries, he announced briskly. My father and Orion were forced to abstain. For the first time in their lives, they were powerless in their own company. I didn't stay to gloat. There was nothing left to say. I gave a single polite nod to the chairman. My lawyer will be in touch to draft the charter for the new subsidiary. I said, my voice calm and professional. I gathered my portfolio, turned my back on the wreckage of my family, and walked out of the room. Rowan was waiting for me in the lobby coffee shop, pretending to read a newspaper. He looked up as I approached, his eyes wide with nervous anticipation. He didn't have to ask. He saw it on my face. A huge, slow grin spread across his lips. So, he said, folding the paper, how'd it go? General, the war is over. I said, a real weary smile finally touching my own lips. Now the work begins. We walked out of the Garcia and Vanguard Tower and went straight to the airport. A week later, I was back in Silas Croft's sun-drenched study in Santa Fe. The formal partnership agreement lay on the table between us. We signed it, the scratch of our pens, the only sound in the room. Garcia Legacy was born. When we were done, Silas opened a bottle of exquisite aged tequila. He poured 2 glasses. He didn't toast to the new company or to the project. He simply raised his glass. To Annalise, he said, his voice thick with respect, and to the warrior who carries her torch. The aftershocks came in waves. My father was forced to issue a press release, a masterpiece of corporate spin that Rowan forwarded to me with a string of laughing emojis. It lauded the firm's bold, innovative return to our founding principles led by the visionary architect Thessaly Garcia. Every word must have felt like acid on his tongue. My mother tried a different tactic, emotional blackmail. Long, rambling emails began to arrive in my inbox daily, filled with guilt-laced prose about how I was tearing the family apart, how she didn't know the cold, ruthless person I had become. After the 3rd one, I replied, "Dear Mother," I wrote, "you are right you don't know who I am, because you never took the time to look. I am my grandmother's granddaughter. I am building something that will last. I hope one day you can find it in yourself to be proud of that." She never wrote again. Orion simply vanished. Rowan heard through the grapevine that he had taken an extended leave of absence from the firm. He was somewhere in Southeast Asia, apparently trying to find himself. I almost pitied him. He had spent his entire life desperately trying to be a pale imitation of our father, only to discover that the original blueprint was the one that truly mattered. My new life began to take shape brick by brick. I moved to Santa Fe, permanently setting up the headquarters for Garcia Legacy in a beautiful light-filled office downtown. Rowan, declaring that Chicago was officially dead to him, moved his gallery to a larger space on Canyon Road, and our collaboration became a daily reality. He, Silas, and I became an inseparable, albeit unlikely team, a family forged not by blood, but by a shared vision. We were building Solera, a city of light and air and hope, and I was happy, truly deeply happy. Months later, on my 28th birthday, I was standing on a dusty mesa in the New Mexico desert. Below me, the foundation for the first residential block of Solera was being laid, a skeleton of steel and concrete rising from the red earth. It was real. It was happening. The sun was warm on my face, the sky a perfect cloudless blue. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Rowan or Silas. But it was a text from a number I didn't have saved. "Happy birthday, Thessaly. I was wrong. Your grandmother would be proud. Dad." I stared at the words on the screen for a long time, the wind whipping a loose strand of hair across my face. It wasn't an apology, not really. It wasn't a promise that things would change. It was just an acknowledgement, a single hairline crack in the fortress of his pride. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't a reunion, but it was perhaps a beginning. I didn't reply. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked out at the vast, beautiful, empty landscape, at the foundation of the city I was building. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of impossible gold and rose. It wasn't a perfect ending wrapped in a neat little bow. My old family was broken perhaps irreparably, but I was not. I was whole. I had taken the pieces of a life lived in the shadows, and I had built a new foundation, one that was strong and honest and entirely my own. And for the first time, I felt truly, completely free. Looking back on it all now, it's funny. The most important foundation I ever built wasn't out there in the New Mexico desert. It was inside myself. For years, I thought my value was something I had to earn from my family. I thought if I just worked harder, was more agreeable, made myself smaller, they would finally see me. But the truth is, the problem wasn't my visibility. It was their vision. My story started with a forgotten birthday, but I know many of you have your own version of that. A moment where you realized the people who were supposed to see you most clearly didn't see you at all. And what I've learned is that the pain of being overlooked isn't a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their limitations. Your first step isn't to shout louder to make them hear you. It's to get quiet enough to finally hear yourself. I thought my only family was the one I was born into, but I was wrong. I found a real family in a cousin who believed in me and in a mentor who challenged me. It taught me that family isn't about obligation or blood. It's about respect. It's about the people who hand you a hammer and help you build, not the ones who just watch you carry the weight. What does the word family truly mean to you? Have you ever had to build your own? You know, my initial plan was fueled by anger, by a desire for revenge. But revenge is about tearing their world down, and that just leaves everyone standing in the rubble. The real power, the lasting victory, came when I stopped focusing on their story and started writing my own, when I stopped trying to break their foundation and focused on building mine. Some people might watch my story and say I was too harsh, that I should have been more forgiving. Others might say I didn't go far enough. There's no easy answer, and maybe there isn't supposed to be one. What do you think? Is there a right or a wrong way to reclaim your life from people who took it for granted? I'd love to read your perspective in the comments. Ultimately, this is what I hope you take away from my journey. The silence of your own worth should never be broken by the noise of their expectations. If this story made you think, if it resonated with that part of you that's waiting to be seen, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We explore stories like this every week, stories about the moment people stop asking for permission and start building their own legacy. You never know when the next one might be the story you need to hear.